In this video, I'm going to walk through the step-by-step process to take this unedited raw photograph on the left through to the final and fully edited photograph on the right. Here is our raw unedited photo of the Starling. First step is going to be to create a virtual copy. We'll keep the original so we can compare changes. I'm gonna sort the crop out first. I'm going to go for a 16:9 vertical. And if you want to change the orientation of the crop, if you press X, let's bring that down. I'm going to get quite tight into the Starling so we can get a good look at the detail of its colours and feathers. Okay, that's that. I'm going to sort there's a slight rotation or a slight angle I want to change here. You can see the edge of the railing here against the edge of the image. There's a bit of an angle, so I want to fix that. And I'm going to use the transform tools for that. I prefer these for this sort of fine adjustments. And I'm just keeping an eye on the edge. As I'm changing the slider, I'm keeping an eye on the edge here. Let's have a look. Yeah, something like that. That's good. Okay, I think I want to move the crop slightly. Because the Starling's facing slightly to the right, I want to move it over to the left there so its head's more or less central. Yeah, something like that. How's that looking? Okay, I might want to get rid of this corner, come in even tighter. And yeah, let's go with that for now. I might change it later, but that will do for now. Next, I'm going to start working on the overall exposure and bring up the shadows. I'm also going to change the color profile. As you can see, the body of the Starling is quite dark. I guess I probably got my exposure wrong there, but you know, it's a raw file, so we can bring a lot of information back from the shadows. So let's create a virtual copy for this step. I'm going to change the profile to a linear profile. This is going to make it look even worse, darker and less contrast, but it's a good base to start with. So then bring up the exposure quite a bit. Something like that. I might have a look at, let's set the top point here for now. Trying not to clip for the moment, so that's much brighter. And I think I'm actually going to bring some of the shadows up as well to get a bit more out of the body. There we go. Now I want to bring out some color. These linear profiles are very flat and lose a lot of color. So let's work on that. And for this step, I'm going to use the calibration saturation controls. This gives me a bit more control over how much we're getting. So I can bring that up quite a lot. Try the greens. There we go. And the reds. So a lot more color now. I might look at the white balance. It's ever so slightly, perhaps a bit too warm. So let's just see what the auto does. Not that much difference. It was in daylight, even more warm. It's not quite what I want. So I'm just going to try and move this slightly. There we go. A minor adjustment, but I think that is a bit better. Now I want to introduce a bit more contrast into the shadow tones. There are two ways of doing this, or that I usually do this. One is to use the shadow and black sliders. So, for example, I could start pulling down the blacks to create more contrast there. Let's have a look with the tone curve. I'm going to use the point selector just to see. So what I'm doing is just hovering over the parts of the feathers where I want to have the contrast, and I'm looking on the curve where those points are. So roughly in that bottom third of the curve. So, and you can select with this in the image, but I'm just going to select straight onto the curve, something like this, there and there. I'm just going to start bringing that down. While I'm doing this, I'm keeping an eye on the image here to see how it's affecting it. I don't want to lose too much. In fact, I might bring the shadows up even more from here. That's better. And then start pulling them down. And that's adding a bit of saturation as it's doing it as well, or a bit of depth to the colour. How's that looking? Let's zoom in. If you hold shift and left click and then move your mouse left and right, that's going to zoom in and out. Okay, but I think that's good for now. Now I want to start looking at some texture and sharpening on the Starling to bring out some of the details. So we'll create a mask, and I'm going to use the objects selection with a brush, and I'm just going to brush over the whole of the Starling and see how the mask looks. Okay, that's the mask drawn. Let's have a look at the overlay. Wow, that is brilliant. That seems to have got the whole thing. Fantastic. Now I'm going to start looking at bringing out some detail in the Starling. So we'll zoom in a bit so we can see it a bit easier. Let's select the mask. Let's call it Starling. And then this step is all about adjusting the clarity, texture and sharpening, and each step building on the previous. So I'm not going to go too far with each one, because you'll find, if I move the clarity all the way across, you can see we've lost loads of detail in the shadows, and it just looks very digital and not very nice. So just going to add a little bit there, maybe a bit less, and then a bit of texture. And I think after I've done this, I might actually bring the shadows up a bit more. Bit of texture, and then let's look at the sharpening. And I might, well, let's look at a before and after. I think that's quite a good improvement. The next step is to work on the eye. So I'm going to create a new mask for that. And I'm just going to use the brush tool. I'm going to zoom in close and just brush over the eye. Like that. Let's see what we've got. And then I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to smooth it out by using the noise reduction. And then I'm going to increase the contrast and overall brightness so that it stands out. So bring that up. Quite a steep curve. So it's nice and bright. And then let's zoom all the way out, and hopefully we can see, let's call that eye. And then with the before and after, it's a small change. But I just want to make sure that eye is as bright as it can be, the reflection in there. For the next step, I'm finding this colour in the background slightly distracting, this blue, especially where it's right up next to the Starling here. So I want to see if I can remove this colour from the background, just desaturate it. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to duplicate and invert the Starling mask, and let's call this not Starling for now. And then I'm going to, so that's selected everything that isn't the Starling. And what I want to do is now just select the blue from this new mask. So I'm going to intersect this mask with the color range. Let's turn off the overlay. And I'm just going to select somewhere in this blue here. And what that's done is it's only selected this blue out of the inverted mask. And then I'm just going to refine this to make sure we're getting all of that blue, or most of it. And then very simply, I'm just going to desaturate that. And that is going to help separate the Starling from the background even more. Perhaps I won't desaturate it fully, but somewhere like that. And then we can see the before and after. I think that's much better. On to the final few steps now. First thing I'm going to do is add a bit more saturation to the Starling. I'm just going to use this saturation control on the Starling mask. And not going to go crazy. If I push it all the way, you can see that looks quite unrealistic and not very appealing. So I just want to add a bit more, something like that. I want to change the crop slightly. I find these very thin lines right next to the edge of the photo, it's minor, but I find them slightly distracting. So I'm just going to readjust the crop to remove those. I want to give the viewer of the photo no reason to be looking at anything other than the main subject, which is the Starling. Yep, that's a bit better. And lastly, I want to add a vignette. I say lastly, I think I've got one other thing after this that I want to do. So I'm just going to add a bit of a vignette. Again, this is to draw the viewer's eye to the Starling. I'm going to increase the feather so that it's not too steep from the darker edges to the lighter middle. I think that's okay. And I think for a very final touch, I actually want to bring the whole brightness up. And this isn't ideal, but I'm going to have a go doing it with the exposure and just make a very tiny adjustment. Let's see what we can do. I might go to something like that. And then, I wonder if I can bring that vignette down again. Okay. And I think the last thing to do is to have a look at a before and after.